The morning Grace Whitfield walked out with 2 suitcases and a wedding ring left on the kitchen counter. Marcus Hale had just come home from burying a friend. He stood in the doorway of the house they'd bought together, still wearing the dress uniform from the funeral, and watched her load the last box into a car that wasn't his. Their daughter, Nora, was 6 years old, asleep upstairs, unaware that the ground beneath her small life was about to shift forever. Grace didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She simply said the words that would echo in Marcus's chest for the next 4 years, "I need a life you can't give me, Marcus. I need someone who's actually here." He wanted to remind her that he'd been not here, because he'd been in Fallujah, in Kandahar, in places whose names he wasn't allowed to say out loud, protecting the very freedom she now used to walk away. But grief doesn't argue. It just watches the taillights disappear. If this story about second chances and quiet strength moves something in you, hit like, drop a comment, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House, because we believe kindness always finds its way back. 4 years later, Marcus was no longer a Navy SEAL. He was a single father running a small auto repair shop on the edge of Charleston, hands permanently stained with engine grease, a man who had traded night raids for PDA meetings and BB guns for backpack shopping. He never spoke about his service. Not to customers, not to neighbors, not even to Nora, who only knew her father as the quiet man who made pancakes shaped like stars and never missed a single school recital. The medals, the classified missions, the men he had carried out of burning buildings, all of it lived in a small locked box in his closet, buried beneath old photographs he couldn't bring himself to throw away. Grace, meanwhile, had married into a different universe entirely. Her new husband, Julian Ashford, was the kind of man whose name appeared in business magazines, a real estate mogul with glass towers in 4 cities and a mansion on the coast that looked more like a museum than a home. For a while, Grace believed she'd made the right choice. Julian gave her everything money could buy. But money, she was slowly learning, could not buy warmth. Julian was polite to Nora during the mandated custody exchanges, but distant, the way a man is polite to furniture. He cancelled family dinners for board meetings. He forgot birthdays and sent assistants to fix his mistakes. Grace began to understand, quietly and painfully, that she had traded a man who showed up in small, invisible ways for a man who performed generosity only when cameras were watching. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon, sunlight spilling gold across the marble floors of Julian's estate, when Grace's entire understanding of her life cracked open. She had gone looking for a spare passport in Julian's private study, a room she rarely entered, filled with awards, framed magazine covers, and a wall safe disguised behind a bookshelf. Julian was traveling, and the tech support man was there to fix the home security system, which required the safe briefly opened for wiring access. Grace, curious in that idle way people are curious about rooms they're forbidden to fully know, glanced inside as the technician worked. And there, nestled among stacks of documents and a velvet box of cufflinks, was something that made her breath catch in her throat, a Navy SEAL trident medal, engraved on the back with initials she would recognize in her sleep, MDH Marcus Daniel Hale. Her mind refused to process it at first. Perhaps it was a coincidence. Perhaps another man shared his initials. But beneath the medal was a folded citation, yellowed slightly with age, describing an act of valor during a hostage rescue operation in circumstances so harrowing that Grace's hands trembled as she read it. It was Marcus's name. Marcus's unit. Marcus's mission, the one he never spoke about, the one that had left a scar along his ribs that she used to trace with her fingers when they were young and in love and she still believed she knew him. Confused and shaken, Grace asked the technician, carefully, where such personal military items usually came from in a collection like this. The man, unaware of the weight of what he was revealing, mentioned offhandedly that Mr. Ashford had a habit of acquiring rare memorabilia through private brokers, including, apparently, medals and citations quietly sold off by desperate veterans who needed money more than metal. Grace felt the floor tilt beneath her. She thought of Marcus in the years after his discharge, injured, uninsured for a period, scraping together funds to keep custody of Nora, refusing to ask his own parents for help out of stubborn pride. She remembered, now with sickening clarity, a season when Marcus had seemed unusually withdrawn, unusually quiet about finances. She had assumed it was simply his nature. She never once imagined he had sold a piece of his own sacrifice, his own history, to keep their daughter fed and housed. Julian had bought it. Displayed it. Treated the actual blood and courage of another man like a trophy for his vault, a curiosity to admire in private, stripped of context, stripped of the human being who had earned it. That night, Grace could not sleep. She sat in the enormous, cold bedroom of her enormous, cold marriage, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to fully feel the weight of what she had walked away from. Marcus had never been absent because he didn't care. He had been absent because he was somewhere dark and dangerous, doing something that required a courage most people would never understand, all so that people like her could sleep safely at night. And when the country was done using him, when the missions ended and the government moved on, he had come home injured and quietly rebuilt a life for their daughter with nothing but grit and love, never once asking Grace for sympathy, never once letting Nora see him struggle. She thought about the man beside her now, successful, admired, wealthy, who had never once carried anything heavier than a business deal, yet collected the evidence of real sacrifice like decoration. The next weekend, when Grace picked up Nora from Marcus's small house for her scheduled time, she lingered at the door longer than usual. Marcus, wiping his hands on a towel, sensed something different in her expression, something unreadable. She asked, quietly, if they could talk after he'd tucked Nora in. He agreed, cautious, uncertain. That evening, sitting across from him at the small kitchen table where he had eaten 1,000 lonely dinners, Grace told him what she had seen in the vault. She watched something flicker behind his eyes, not anger, not pride, but a raw, exposed grief he had clearly buried for years. He admitted it quietly. Yes, he had sold it. During the worst of it, when Nora needed surgery for a childhood injury and insurance had lapsed during his transition out of service, he had sold the one thing that proved what he had given for his country, because his daughter's health mattered infinitely more than a piece of metal in a drawer. He said it without self-pity, the way men who have truly suffered often speak, plainly, without performance. Grace broke down in front of him for the first time in years. Not out of guilt alone, but out of a devastating clarity. She had left a hero disguised as an ordinary man, chasing a life that looked golden on the outside and was hollow at its core. She apologized, not just for leaving, but for never truly seeing him. Marcus, exhausted from years of solitary strength, did not rush to forgive her, nor did he perform bitterness. He simply listened, the way he'd been trained to listen in rooms far more dangerous than this kitchen. In the weeks that followed, something quietly shifted. Grace filed for divorce from Julian, unable to remain in a marriage that had shown her its emptiness so starkly. She didn't return to Marcus expecting reconciliation, only clarity, a desire to finally be a present, honest mother, and to make amends with the man she had underestimated. Marcus, for his part, allowed himself, cautiously, to be seen. He told Nora, gently, the truth about what her father had once done, not to seek admiration, but because a child deserves to know the quiet heroism woven into her own bloodline. Julian, when confronted, offered no apology, only irritation that his collection had caused a scandal. He never understood, and perhaps never could, that what he had purchased wasn't an object. It was a piece of someone's soul, sold out of love, not vanity. Eventually, through a private veterans outreach organization, Grace helped facilitate the medal's return to Marcus, not the same one he had sold, for it had already been passed elsewhere by then, but a formal replacement issued through proper military channels, along with an official rededication ceremony that Nora attended in a small white dress, holding her father's rough hand as his old commanding officer spoke about valor that doesn't ask for applause. If this story touched your heart even a little, please consider liking this video, leaving a comment, and sharing it with someone who needs a reminder that quiet strength is still strength, and subscribing to Wisdom Story House for more stories like this one. Before we close this chapter, if you believe real heroes are often the quietest ones among us, type, "I honor him," in the comments below. Let Marcus, and every silent protector like him, know that their sacrifice is seen. In the end, Grace and Marcus did not fall back into the fairy tale of their youth. Life is rarely that simple, and healing takes time. Neither of them rushed. But they built something steadier, a shared devotion to Nora, a mutual respect forged in hard truth, and the beginning of a friendship neither had expected to find on the other side of heartbreak. Marcus kept the new medal not in a locked box, but on the wall of his small living room, in plain sight, no longer something to hide, but something Nora could look at every single day and understand exactly what quiet courage looks like. An ordinary man, in an ordinary kitchen, who had simply refused to stop loving the people who needed him most.